believe it this morning. Sunny in the rock. Let's sing it out. Sunny in the rock. Freedom with the Spirit is bounty in the wilderness. You alone satisfy. Sunny in the rock, water
share these with your friends. They're great testimonies of so many different people from our church. And of course, we have another one today. So our interview today is with a young single mother who has worked at the Way Out Ministries now for about a year. She's one of our newest additions, and she's likely the first person that you will be greeted by when you enter or when you call here at the Way Out Ministries. You'll also see her working with volunteers at events and assisting other staff in many, many different ways. She just kind of runs around and does all kinds of things. And of course, like everybody else here at the Way Out Ministries, if you work here, you're a multitasker. You do lots of things. She has lots of other skills too. She's a fantastic photographer. She's very artsy and craftsy. She also helps do all the set designs here. She runs around doing a lot of stuff, and we really appreciate her. She has a passionate love for the Lord, and she has proved also, as we stretch her more and more and more, she has proved to be a really great Bible teacher. She works in our young adults group. She just keeps on trying new things, and so she's trying yet another new thing today by being interviewed here. So if you will welcome Aundrea Velasquez. I just want to make it clear before we get started that this interview has nothing to do with the fact that you get paid to do this. This was a request by your pastor, not a requirement of your work, right? You'll attest to that. So why are you sitting here in the hot seat? Why have you said, yeah, I'll be interviewed?
Well, I figured I'm going to be nervous no matter what time I do it. And I feel like there's so much that God's done in my life, and I feel like it's important for me to be able to share that with people. I feel like when he does something in our lives, it's our job now to be able to share the goodness of him to others. So no matter how nervous I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. Like, this is what he's done for me, so I'm able to share it and give any hope to anyone else that might need it.
Amen. There's a passage in 1 Peter 3:15 that says, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord, and always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, and to give the reason for the hope that is within you." And you have a lot of hope within you, and you have a lot of hope to share, so I'm glad that you're willing to sit here in this seat and share it with everybody today. So thank you for sharing that hope today. Okay, so I'm going to start off by asking a question that you usually don't ask a lady, but, it's me, so. You're obviously young enough not to be offended by this question. How old are you?
I'm 28.
28 years old, and
Yes.
you have one daughter, and how old is she?
She is 12.
12 years old.
Yes.
And her name is?
Elisa.
Elisa. Mm-hmm. So you were a teen mother, obviously.
Yes, obviously.
It's an obvious statement.
Do the math.
So how old were you when you got pregnant with Elisa?
So I was pregnant at 15, had her at 16.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, and you were a party girl.
Yes.
We just got to get that right out. You'll see. She was a party girl. I know it's hard to look at Aundrea, to talk to Aundrea and go, she was what? Oh, yes. Yeah. You will see. You were a party girl, and your boyfriend was a gangster, and your parents were actively involved in Christian ministry.
Yes.
In fact, when you were born, your parents were running a woman's recovery home, a Christian recovery home. Mm-hmm. So let's begin then. Describe to us your family of faith that you were born into.
So my parents ran a rehab home when I was born. So my mom tells me stories of like her teaching and like me being in her arms. And then 11 months later, they had my sister. So at that point, they kind of stepped back from that. But they still were very involved in ministry. And even as we got older, I want to say we were probably like 6 or 9, and they went back into rehab. And so we lived with a bunch of women recovering from drugs, alcohol, any type of substance abuse. We were around it at a very young age. So that was probably going on for another like 3 or 4 years. And yeah, they were very active, and we were at church every Sunday, all day.
Your dad actually later became the assistant pastor there.
Correct, yeah. My dad was an assistant pastor.
So this is a family saturated in ministry.
Correct.
Ministry is in the life blood of
all
your
I knew.
family. And you had a lot of faith also in your family members. Many of your family members were people of faith.
Yes.
Matter of fact, your grandma Lucy shared on Table Talks
Yes, she
in our first edition, our first series. She did a great job.
Yes, that's why I'm up here. I'm like, if my grandma could do it, I could do it. I got
Grandma
this.
pushed you up here.
She inspires me all the time.
So you said you have a sister, and she's 11 months older than, or you're 11 months older than she is. So you and your sister were growing up in a family of faith. You were surrounded by Christian love and support, actively involved in your church, and you loved your church.
Oh,
You told me that we loved going. It was great. And you lived also in a nice residential community, and you both did well in elementary school. You weren't like star students, but
Yeah, it was decent.
you liked school. You went
I
to
got by.
school. You did okay.
Yeah.
And then came adolescence. Woo. That word, that darn word. And then came your first crush. And who did you fall for, and where did you meet him?
So, without too much detail, but I met him at church, and he was actively involved in one of the neighborhoods that was in the city that I was going to church at. And prior to that, we were kind of like curious on like what was out there, like we were in church all the time. So when I met him, it was like it added to already the curiosity that I had going on prior to that.
So here you are at a family of faith. Your dad and mom are actively involved. Your pastor invited some people that he knew that were gang affiliated.
Yeah.
But that's what we do, right? In the church, we invite people to come to know Jesus, right? And then you met this guy that you were infatuated with. So what was it about that lifestyle that attracted you and your sister? I mean, you watched people kicking drugs. You watched, you knew about the gang lifestyle. You saw how detrimental it was to people.
Yeah.
What do you think it was that fascinated you so much about it?
I don't know. I guess I was more of like, I want to experience it myself. Like, even though I knew it was wrong, I knew it wasn't like the ideal lifestyle to go to, it was still like the curiosity that like drove me to it. And it was like.
And how old were you right now?
At that time? Ooh, I was like probably 12, 13.
12 or 13 years old.
Yeah.
And there's a passage in James 1:13 through 15. It says, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, or does he tempt anyone? But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. And then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. So according to the Bible, you were in the beginning stages of death.
Yeah, felt like it too.
And that's a pretty good description, isn't it? You were enticed.
Yeah.
Even though you had seen all the warning signs, you were like, well, I'm really curious about this. And then you met the cat of curiosity, that boy. So you told me that your mom grew up in a gang-infested neighborhood, and she purposely moved. She and your dad said, we will not live where I grew up. We will live in another city for our kids' sake. And so they actually moved to this neighborhood so that you would not grow up in a gang-infested neighborhood, in order that their children would be safe. She and your dad shared their life's difficult journey with you. You've told me that they kind of shared with you, we were a kind of a mess. I mean, they didn't go into deep detail, but they did share with you, so you knew. You saw firsthand the struggles and the pain of drug addiction right there in the woman's recovery home. And you heard the many testimonies of those in your church who had been delivered from the gang lifestyle. And yet you fell for a boy in a neighborhood gang. So tell me, how hard did you fall? And where did he take you in that fall? You and your sister, actually.
Yeah, we were kind of partners at everything. So it was my first boyfriend. So I would say it was felt pretty hard. Um, and because he was very actively involved, I feel like it was very like everything that he did, I was right there beside him. And I kind of did everything that he was active in. So whether it was drugs, whether it was selling drugs, whether it was doing just things on the streets, like I was like right there. So yeah, he kind of opened the door for me. That was like a whole new world. And like I said, I was already curious, so now I just had it like accessible now to do whatever was needed.
And so you and your sister were very close, so you guys kind of like were buddies.
Yeah.
So she did everything that you were doing.
We were right next to each other.
Like Matthew 15:14 says, the blind lead the blind, and they both fall into the pit. That's exactly. You were the pit leader, I guess, since you were the older sister. So you drank, you smoked pot, you took drugs. You said that you took a lot of ecstasy.
I did.
I mean, that's crazy. You're 13.
Yeah, I was like, 13.
Your sister then is 12. And you went to house parties all over the neighborhood.
Correct. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is you're going to church on Sunday.
Yeah, we were still going to church on Sunday.
What a gal.
Yeah.
So couple of girls. And how did you keep all of this away from the eyes of your parents? You got to explain that, because that seems like some crazy stuff going on.
Yeah.
And your parents did not know that their girls were living a double life.
Yeah. They were aware. I feel like there was moments where we weren't so slick and we got caught. But it was never to the extreme. Like, they never realized like the depth of it, of how far deep we were in a lot of things. And when we did get caught, like my dad will sit there, he would discipline us, like we would get in trouble, but as soon as our time of like whether we were grounded or our phone taken away, whatever it may be, and even then we've always found a way, whether if it was just like us two or like our friends coming over and still doing things, like it was still on our mind to just somehow figure it out. And yeah, we just went right back into it every time.
I found that that's true with sin, right? I mean, we will always find an excuse for our sin.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
No matter how crazy it is, we will have an excuse. We will share that sin with others so that we have participants joining us,
Yes.
right? And we will find a way to sin no matter where we go, if we are into it. And that's exactly what you did. But you would actually, get dropped off at a church friend's house.
Yeah.
And then what would you do?
Well, to get to where my boyfriend was at the time, we would get dropped off on the way other side of the city by my parents and walk all the way across just to hang out with him and his friends. And we did that often.
And that was miles.
And then it was miles. We walked a lot.
You would walk miles to sin.
Yes. And then just to have to wake up early in the morning and come all the way back before my parents picked us up. So we walked twice. Miles.
Well, you're getting a lot of exercise.
Yeah.
But no conviction in your hearts. And sometimes you told me that you guys would even go to church stoned.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah.
Can you all picture Aundrea doing this? I know. I was in awe while I was talking to her. So did you guys know Jesus? I mean, you had a Christian family. Your mom and dad were definitely real Christians.
Yeah.
But what about you guys?
I would say I knew of him. I mean, when you're young, I feel like, especially if you're raised in church, it's easy to like feel like you know him just because you hear so much about him and your whole life is like surrounded by God. But it wasn't until like I got older where I realized I kind of felt the distance or like the unknown part of like, And I didn't think about it then, but now I look back, I'm like, yeah, no, I definitely didn't know him. And it was kind of like I was pulling off of my parents' faith to feel my faith, but that never works, because like I don't have that like one-on-one relationship with him myself.
So you knew of him, but he definitely was not one of your friends.
Very distant.
He wasn't included in your friendship circle.
Yes.
I've heard it said missing heaven by 18 inches, right? From your head to your heart is 18 inches. We can know all about Jesus as a historical figure. We can hear the stories, but until we come into a personal relationship with him, we don't know him.
Yeah.
And we can't appreciate what it means to be guided and directed by him. So when did things start falling apart?
There was lots of moments.
Well, you said that your parents got wise a few times. So.
Yeah, so my dad always told us that obviously my parents were very praying parents. And my dad always would tell us, like, no matter what you do, like, it's going to come out to the light. And there's been lots of times where even, like, just as simple as, like, my parents laying there and us being at a friend's house and them, like, just feeling like the Holy Spirit prompting them, like, go get your girls. And them having, like, no idea why or what. So they would just, like, drive by the house we were at. And one time they did that. And I remember walking because I needed to walk. Because I don't know why I needed to walk, but I needed to walk. And I was walking with a friend, and, like, my parents pull up. And they're like, where are you going? And at that point, I was, like, I was not so gone, but I was gone enough to be like, oh, crap, I'm in trouble. Like, I already knew. Like, this isn't good. And they asked where my sister was, and of course, my sister was in the house, and she was actually passed out in the house. And yeah, I remember my dad having to go in and carry her out, and like him having to get me into the car. Like, it was like a huge mess. So there's lots of moments like that where I know that because they were so attentive to the Holy Spirit and so like continuously praying for us and continuously trusting God with their lives, that they did have moments like that where they were led to be there in a moment.
So you guys got sloppy in your sin, and the mask came off, and they began to not trust you, right?
Correct.
Because
Yeah.
you were not trustworthy anymore. They would restrict you, but as soon as you were off restriction, you would what?
Just go right back to it.
Go right back to it again. So your parents found out. They would yell at you. You said they tried that. All parents tried the yelling, and then they would plead with you.
Yes.
And then you said your mom would pray over you.
Oh, all
What
the
was
time.
that like?
All the time.
That's got to be the conviction of all convictions,
Yes,
right?
Yeah. Yeah, she was constantly praying for us. I mean, I look back, and me and my sister will sit there and talk like, oh my gosh, we put her through so much. Like, it's crazy. And my dad, he's a little bit more like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, he's more disciplined, and he's just like very calm. And my mom was more like the emotional one, and like more like constantly, like, she'll lay hands on us as we were sleeping. I remember waking up and her just praying over us. And yeah, so my mom was just, and regardless, like, they've always loved us. Like, I feel like even in moments like that, like, we never felt unloved, even though we were very hard to love.
And you would pretend you were sleeping.
Oh, yeah. It's like, I don't want to hear it, so I'm just going to let her pray for me.
Finally, your parents decided, we're going to move.
Yes.
We're going to move out of this city because my girls are
We were very
messed
caught
up. So they did. They moved out of the city. When they told you that they were moving, how did that make you guys feel?
It was hard because we were born and raised in that city. So all of our friends were there, and my best friend was there, and like everyone was just, it was comfortable. So like getting up and going to a different city, it sucked.
Yeah. So your parents moved out of the fire and into the frying pan,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Explain what I mean by that.
Well, we went from one neighborhood to another neighborhood. So everything got carried on this way.
So the neighborhood that your parents ended up moving you into, out of just sheer desperation to get you out of the place where you were in trouble, was the place that she got into trouble when she was younger, and
Yes.
swore that she would never move back to.
Correct. Yes.
But a relative's house opened up, and they thought, of course, well, this has got to be better than where she's at, or where they're at.
Yeah.
And so they did. They moved from the fire into the frying pan, and they moved to save your lives. But what happened instead?
Well, because of the fact that we had family here, and it wasn't just like this city, it was surrounding cities that I had family that grew up in. So on both sides of my family, everything we did there was just as equally accessible here. And because it was like, I thought I was gonna come in like, oh, a new girl, and like no one knows me. It was like, oh, I know your cousin, like, oh, like this and that, like you're so and so, huh? And I'm like, oh, yeah, like so, like it was just like a click of like, okay, like, I could get around here too.
So in the beginning, you were partying in your former city
Yes.
and in your new city.
We were doing both.
So you were just having double the parties.
Yeah, I had friends there and friends here.
You eventually broke up with your boyfriend.
Yes.
And started just partying in this city. And of course, you changed schools. You went to Artesia High School. Your sister went to Fetty Middle School.
Yes.
And then, of course, that escalated your crazy life because you were both popular. People just said, oh, we know your family.
Yeah.
And you were in.
Yeah.
And you know, I think this really kind of astonished me, because I was thinking of my own life when I was younger and I was in trouble. I would go to parties, but they were all over the map, and we had to drive a ways to get there and things like that. But your parties were within 1 square mile,
Yeah.
where you knew everybody,
Yeah, we knew.
and literally every party you went to, you knew people there.
Yes. Yeah.
So that meant free drugs, free booze, and immediate acceptance.
Yes.
That's got to be way worse.
It
of a
was
temptation.
actually worse. Yeah. I had a cousin was a DJ. I had cousins who were actively throwing parties, and it was just very, like I said, it was very easy, more so here. And it was more comfortable too, because I was like, oh, I'm with my cousins. So it was no longer friends. It was like, oh, I have cousins with me now. So things kind of got worse.
Yeah. So party girls, popular party girls, well attached in the city. Your grades in school, of course,
They were bad. Really. Yeah.
crashed.
Yes.
Because you had other things to pay attention to. You ended up in detention. And you saw a good-looking guy in detention with some nice-looking tattoos, you said. And what happened with that guy?
That was another one. Yeah, I mean, of course, I met him in detention, and it was just his appearance. I guess it was just kind of what I was used to and what I was gravitating to at that time.
And so he was a gangster, and you began hanging out with him all the time, became his girlfriend, and you got involved with everything that he was involved in. You took drugs, you sold drugs. You told me that you used to put drugs in your shoe
I did.
and what, go to school?
Yeah.
Those were on the days you went to school
Well, the days I did go to school was probably for that.
to sell drugs.
Yes.
You got involved with gangs and the gang's rivals, of course. You got involved with the police.
I did get him. Yes.
You were fearless.
Yes.
Why were you fearless?
I don't know. I thought I was invincible, that nothing could happen to me.
Isn't it crazy that young people are like that?
Yeah.
I find that to be true across the board, right? It's like somehow they don't think that they can be the ones that have the bad stuff fall on them. Like, I can't die.
Yeah.
I'm young.
Yeah.
I've got life ahead of me. I can't overdose. I can't,
Yeah.
Are actually, they don't even really think about it, right? Did you even think about those things?
I wasn't thinking at all. I don't remember thinking at any time.
And I ask you the question, gee, it's very dangerous for a pretty girl, and your sister's also a pretty girl, to walk around from party to party doing drugs and ecstasy and alcohol in a gang-infested neighborhood. That's just like a recipe for absolute disaster.
I
But
don't know
yet,
how.
you told me that that you always were in bands of sisters.
Yeah, we like traveled in groups. There was always at least 5 or 6 of us together, sometimes more. So we kind of just,
And then I guess you also had the protection of your family name.
well, people. Yeah.
People might not want to mess with you,
Yeah,
even though they are tempted to. They would think maybe twice.
Yeah.
And then there was the gang. So you were able to just move around. And you told me that there were even a few times where you were carried out because you were so gone.
Yes. Yeah.
And now, of course, how old are you?
I believe I was almost 14. A lot happened in the span of 2 to 3 years.
Some of you with young kids, you're just going, what?
Yes.
Are you kidding? You're looking at your kid next to you and going, no.
Yeah.
It is shocking.
Yes.
So were there any moments of clarity for you at all? Were there any bad things that happened where you just went, oh, this is dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of the times when my life was on the line. I've been in multiple drive-bys, and I had guns pointed at me directly, and in those moments, I would say, like, yeah, I was like, what in the heck are you doing? But it was just in the moment. The moment it would go away, and then it didn't change.
And then you'd
anything.
probably, the moment would go away, and then you would laugh with your friends about it.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, yeah. And then I've also experienced someone close to me who had an overdose, and like even then, it was like a huge, like pivotal moment. But it's still kind of like
It went away.
it went away. Yeah,
And you were almost arrested.
I was arrested. Yeah.
You were arrested, but you before you were arrested, you had run-ins with the police
Oh yes,
before.
I've had multiple. Yes.
And then finally came the arrest.
Correct. Yes.
So you were 14 and your boyfriend was arrested, and he went to jail, and you were put on probation.
I was.
How
very-
did that work out? I mean, why didn't you go to jail?
Well, I had a cousin who was a sheriff, and thankfully, because of what I was involved in, like my part, it wasn't as serious as his part, and he was also on gang injunction, so like his was a lot more serious. So there was a way I was able to get out of it, but I was put on probation for a year.
The crazy thing is we can look at that as a situation that happened and go, wow, that's kind of interesting. He went to jail. You got probation because of, a connection. But I think your greater connection was really your Father in heaven.
Yes. Oh, 100%.
Because you're, yeah,
Yes.
it was.
Yes.
Because your Father in heaven says, I got to separate these people.
Yes, definitely.
And so there was a separation.
Yes.
You were also drug tested all the time,
All the
so
time.
now you couldn't party like you were.
No, couldn't smoke, couldn't do anything. I was tested.
And again, we can see that was also God's providence,
Yes.
because God knew this girl needs to stop smoking. This girl needs to stop drinking. She needs to stop living the crazy life because something else is happening that you didn't know about. And it shocked you to your senses when you found out. What was that? Explain your probation officer and explain that meeting that you had with her.
So while I was on probation, I would have to meet with the counselor weekly. So at school, I would get pulled out, meet with the counselor, meet with my probation officer. And at that time, I was kind of experiencing something going on with my body. I noticed change. I noticed the way I was feeling. Funny, my sister was getting sick every morning. Like, it was just weird. Like, was getting motion sickness before school. And so I remember going to my counselor and just mentioning to her, like, I think I'm pregnant. And her first thing was like, all right, well, let's get it. I remember now, like, she got me the test, and she's like, all right, well, let's take the test. And I took the test, and it turned out I was pregnant. So I was on probation in counseling with my probation officer when I found out I was pregnant. And her first response was like, you need to tell your parents.
Now, that's an amazing thing in this day and age, especially since we're in California,
Yes.
where we have the most liberal abortion laws anywhere. Because most certainly today, your probation officer or a social worker or a school teacher or a counselor would be expected or even mandated to advise you to have an abortion. And would give you all the reasons why you should have an abortion. And in fact, here in California, you even as without your parents' knowledge, you can be taken to an abortion clinic by your counselor. You can have an abortion without your parents knowing, and it's done.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for that. I feel like I was in such a vulnerable state. I feel like anything at that moment put into me was easy to kind of like flow with. So the fact that it was like, go tell your parents, I was like, okay, even though I didn't tell them for like, it was like 5 months later when they found out. So yeah, I was 5 months pregnant when they
But
found
at least the advice was solid. She
Yes.
didn't tell you why you should terminate your child. She didn't
Yes.
tell you what you should do. She didn't persuade you. She just said, you need to tell your parents,
Yes.
which was great advice. And of course, you told
It was
your best friend.
my best friend, my sister, my boyfriend at the time, and my probation officer were the only ones who knew.
And months are going by.
Yes.
And what time of year is this while the months are going by? You told me you wore lots of sweaters.
Yes. Okay, there we go. It was during summer. And
Oh, sweaters in the summer.
and I remember going to school in like the biggest like hoodies ever just to cover it up. And people like always asking me like, aren't you hot? And I'm like dying. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. And even at home, I wear sweaters all the time. I even think like my grandma would be like, always yell at me like, why are you wearing a big sweater? Like, what is wrong with you? And at that, I was like, well, I'm cold. I'm always cold.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was miserable.
Miserable, but you were holding on to. What was your thought? Eventually, I will be found out, or I'm
don't
looking
know.
pretty unpregnant. I feel good about this.
Yeah, I didn't start showing as much. Obviously, like to myself, I felt like I was showing, but like I've always been petite and like small, so I didn't like from behind or anything. Like you couldn't tell, so it's kind of easy to cover it up.
So tell us about how the cat got out of the bag, so to speak.
Looking at her. So my mom and me were getting our nails done, and at this time I didn't know Heather, but Heather knew my mom. And I remember, and I could be probably saying the whole story wrong,
And
but
Heather, of
just-
course, is a nurse.
Correct.
Right? So okay,
Yes.
that helps.
Yeah. And I remember I think she asked my mom, like, how many months is your daughter? Or she, like, kind of, like, mentioned it. And my mom, like, was, like, questioning, like, oh, like, what do you, like, I know she was, like, confused. And at that point, that kind of, like, put the thought in her head of, like, the possibility. And at that time, she knew me and my boyfriend. Like, she knew I had a boyfriend. And we've got caught a couple of times, like, being at home. So she was kind of aware, but like not fully aware. I think it's kind of like as a mother, like now I could look like we don't want to see trouble or we don't want to see things in our kids. And especially I was so young still. So I think the thought of that was just like, it kept getting pushed behind. Yeah. So I remember going home and sitting there and my mom like coming into my room and she was like, are you pregnant? Like just super straight up. And I was like, no.
Under the sweater.
Yeah, like as I'm, yeah. And she's like, well, is there a possibility that you're pregnant? Or no, she asked, like, have you been, like, active? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, is there a possibility then that you're pregnant? And I was like, possibly. So that night, we went to get a test, and
You already knew the results.
I knew, yeah. And I played the whole part. I was crying with her, like, if I just found out. Like, it was like, yeah. Yeah.
It probably wasn't too hard to muster up the tears because you had a weight of burden on your shoulders
it was
for
just
5
waiting
months.
to come out.
So what would your advice to a girl who might be considering an abortion today or in the future if she should become pregnant?
I think the first thing is reaching out, going to people that you know are going to have wise advice, and realizing that it's not the only way. Like and it seems scary, but there's those that want kids, that can't have kids. There's so many other options. Even though you feel incapable, like there's others that are capable.
So like adoption is
Adoption,
an option.
yes. And realizing that you can't do it on your own. Like, you can't make that choice on your own. So I would say reaching out to as much people as possible.
Would you say tell your parents?
Oh, 100%. Tell your parents, yes. When you're like a month, not 5 months.
Because you need support,
Yes.
and you can find support.
Yeah.
And even if in rare cases where a parent might be against you if you're pregnant, you can always find support, can't you? You can.
There's a lot out there nowadays, more so. And I mean, even like here, like we have resources here that we provide as well.
Yeah, you can call the Way Out Ministries Resource Center at 562-429-2397. And we can help you. We can help you through that and give you many life-affirming resources to help you and your child. Abortion advocates never tell you about the physical and the long-term emotional pain and suffering of having an abortion, but you've seen that in people that you know firsthand. Talk about that a little bit.
So along the time that I was pregnant, I've had close people in my life, whether it was friends, family, multiple of them actually, who went through with that choice. And till this day, we could talk, and it's been like a huge emotional, just like weight on them still. And I feel like you don't think about that. Like, you don't realize like the emotional connection that happens when you're pregnant. So the disconnect there, it does affect you. It does play a role.
It does. Deuteronomy 30:19 and 20 says, "This day I call the heavens and the earth as a witness against you, that I have set before you life and I've set before you death, blessings and curses. And now choose life so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God. Listen to his voice and hold fast to him, for the Lord is your life." You can certainly say that today. The Lord is your life, right? And he is your life connection. He gives us wisdom, he gives us guidance, and he surrounds us with people that are life-affirming people. So you did tell your parents.
Yes.
So what was their response, and how did their actions lead you from darkness into the light of God's forgiveness?
I play this like role, or I play that scene often in my head, and it makes me emotional every time.
Yeah, that's why I got the tissues, right? Here if you need them.
Try to say it without needing tissues. So in that moment, at that time when I got the test, my mom was like, "Your dad doesn't know." And I was like, okay, like that was somehow comforting, knowing that my dad doesn't know that we're taking a pregnancy test. But after we found out it was positive, she's like, "Well, your dad does know, and he's waiting in the room for us." And I was like, oh man. And obviously you can imagine, like the walk from the restroom to the room was like long. Like I remember I was like, oh my God, like I was just not ready for it. And it was crazy because as I walked in there, like he was sitting there, and like I got the complete opposite of what I thought.
Yeah, right there.
I just know like his first words were like, "We're gonna get through this." And yeah, it was like just the like we are gonna get through this. Like the we part was like everything to me. Because at that time, like I felt so alone. Like even though I did have like my boyfriend and like I had my best friend and I had my sister, I still feel like there was such a load because again, like I was so close to my parents and like doing like a huge thing like that, like without them was like a lot and like holding it in was a lot and just feeling like shame and feeling like there was so much feelings that were going on in me. So being able to see like the fact that my parents like loved me in the moment where I felt like the least amount of it, of like I didn't feel worthy of it, they embraced me like no other. So yeah, and like through that, it showed me like, wow, like if my parents could love me and see me the way they do and accept me and like be so graceful in a moment like this where like your 15-year-old daughter is like pregnant with a guy that you probably don't want her pregnant by.
Probably.
Definitely didn't. And the fact that they were able to still embrace me in that moment showed me like, wow, like how much more can God, who is perfect, and my parents are so flawed and they were still able, like how much more can God do that for me, and how good is God, you know? Like, and it's kind of like opened up like a huge like question, like, okay, like this is, yeah, like, it was insane. Yeah. And to this day, like that's still something that reminds me of like the goodness of God is like, because of my parents' love and because they were able to love us with God's love, it was just a glimpse, like just like a tiny bit of his love. Yeah. And it was enough for me to realize like he's so much greater.
That was your epiphany.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The light went on.
Yes.
And I just want to encourage parents how important it is, no matter what should happen with your children, to reach out in love, you know, bite your tongue and say, we will get through this. Amen. And encourage them. Mm-hmm. Because it is. That's the greatest sign of hope that there is when you're in trouble, is to have parents, especially a friend, somebody to just reach out and give you a hug and let you know that they're going to be with you. Yeah. So through your growing relationship with Jesus and your parents and your school and your church and your family and a whole support group of real Christian friends, and I want to put real on there because, you know, I don't know if you and your sister were real Christians when you were getting high and going to church, but people that you said that you can talk to, you know, how important it is to pick the right people to talk to, you know, look at a person's lifestyle and their choices and make sure that they're making wise decisions themselves before you go to them for advice. Because of all these different things in your life, you and your daughter, Elisa, have found help. You found support through the years. Yeah. So tell us about some of those helps that you've received and how they make all the difference in being a single parent.
Yeah, so I feel like going into this, of course, I feel like the enemy was constantly like, especially being a single mom, I feel like you kind of hear like the whisper, like you're lacking. But like I've never felt like I've lacked. Like I feel like God's always showed up and he's always provided. Even like in the beginning stages of my pregnancy, like I said, from my parents to my friends to like happened to be my grandparents are living in the back house. Like I had so much support by my cousins, like my aunts, my uncles. Like my family is incredible and I've had support from them like no other. Until this day, we still do. And even like when I was pregnant, like I went to Tracy and like Tracy had a teen parent program. And like even there, like I was able to learn so much. And that program, like they even taught us how to cook food. Like there was a kitchen in the back and like we learned a lot.
That's a good program at Tracy High School.
Oh, 100%, yes.
Loving teachers, good counseling, yeah.
Yeah, and I was able to graduate there. And then moving to like my church community, like that's been a big role in my life. And even if it's as simple as like reaching out of like, hey, I need prayer, and being comfortable with that. I feel like often we feel like we could do it on our own, and often we feel like we need to do it on our own. But like we need people. Like we're not meant to do this on our own. So just having friends and wise counsel to be able to go to for prayer and whatever it may be has been amazing.
And because of all that support, your identity has not been lost in being a single parent. And of course, I want to make it clear that a parent is great.
Correct,
It has
yes.
all kinds of rewards, and there's a great identity in being a parent. But a person has to be more than just a parent,
Yeah.
especially if they're a single parent and
Yeah.
they're raising their child,
Yeah.
alone. So how did all this help you to grow?
So I feel like first and foremost, obviously my identity is rooted in who I am in God. I feel like that's like the core of where I come from. But outside of that, I feel like God created each of us to, like, we're all different and we all have things that we enjoy doing. So I think it was important for me to, obviously, being a parent is part of me, but it's not all of me. There's so much different parts of me that make Drea. So I've always been very intentional on like making sure like I do have a social life, making sure I do have hobbies that I enjoy. And in moments like that, when it's like outside of me being a parent, I feel like I'm able to come back and be a better parent, right? I'm
Absolutely.
not so like consumed of like, this is it, this is my only identity. And when it comes down to it, like she's gonna grow up and leave and I'm gonna be stuck like, oh, now I don't know who I am, And I'm like, I don't want that. So yeah, I've always made it a thing to make sure.
That's good advice for every parent,
Oh, yes.
even non parents that aren't single.
Yeah,
We have to have other outlets to be the best parents that we can be.
yes.
It says in Ecclesiastes 4, beginning in verse 9, it says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. And if either of them falls down, then one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. And a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And I always like to think of that 3 strands as being, well, it's me, it's others, and it's God.
Yes.
And with those wrapped around you, you are not broken. You will be able to make it through anything, really.
Yes.
So that's been your story for sure. So Aundrea, your sister is living for Jesus now. That's good news.
Yes, we both are.
And your daughter's father and you are friends. And he's doing well now in
Yes.
life, which is also a great story.
Yes.
And you have a job that you love, and you're surrounded with love and support.
Yes.
Praise God for all of that, right?
Yes.
But
But
your daughter just turned 12.
yes.
And she's living in Hawaiian Gardens.
Yeah.
And you're a single mom with bills to pay. And so many thoughts can come rushing in about what if?
Yeah.
And those could consume you. So what do you do, and what advice can you give to a single mother that's in your shoes?
Man.
That's like a killer
Yeah.
question, isn't it?
Honestly, it comes down to just trusting in God. It comes down. And even like there's moments where I don't. There's moments where I'm like, Lord, like I need you to help me trust you. And like being honest with that and realizing like, first, he's not scared of what my thoughts are. Like he knows how I feel sometimes. And there's times where, yeah, it could feel hopeless. And then I'm reminded through the Holy Spirit, and I'm reminded of like the goodness that he has done in my life. And that brings the remembrance of like how good he is. And yeah, like just constantly coming back to like how faithful he's been and realizing that he's never failed me. He's always been there throughout every single point in my life. He's continued to show up. And even now, like as a mom, I would say too, like even praying for them and like being very intentional on how you pray for them and asking the Holy Spirit, like, how do I love my child in this season? I think that's like my favorite question right now, because I'm like, I don't know how sometimes. And yeah, like just being very intentional on seeking wisdom. And praying goes for anybody, like anyone in your relation, like anybody that you feel like you're in relation with. And just, I feel like there's so much power in prayer. And it's, yeah.
Absolutely.
So seeking for help for prayer too, asking for it.
Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight.
Yes. Yes.
That's wisdom, pure wisdom from God's word.
Yeah.
Wisdom for the mother and wisdom for the daughter.
Yes.
And wisdom for all of us.
Yeah.
He will make our paths straight. We must trust him. We must follow him. We need a
Yeah.
shepherd in this life.
Yeah. And I come back to as well, where it's like, I know my grandma prayed for my mom. My mom's prayed for us. And now it's my job to pray for my daughter. And realizing like, there's so much power in that. Like if he showed up for me, like how much more is he going to show up for her? And realizing like she is his daughter before she's my daughter.
Yeah.
And he's going to take care of us no matter what.
So are you following in your mom's footsteps and laying hands on your daughter in bed?
I am, yes.
And is she pretending she's asleep?
Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, that's a great thing to carry on. What
Yeah.
a wonderful picture that is.
Yeah.
A mother praying over her daughter by her bed and just saying, God, you got this. I know you got this. You got me. You got this one.
He always has.
And he always will. So, Aundrea, thank you for sharing your life and your hope. There is great hope in this testimony. I'm glad that you and Alisa are in our church, that she's in the youth group, and that you're working for the Way Out Ministries. It's great to have you here. It's great fun to talk with you. And friend, I want to tell you that are listening that if you're in a dark place as you're hearing this interview, then please remember Aundrea's story and know that there's hope. Amen? There is hope and there is healing in Jesus and in the counsel of those who have a relationship with Jesus. So if you're in need of hope, please contact us and let us share it with you. And I'm sure Aundrea too. You might call and she might answer the phone.
Me.
You might just have a talk with Aundrea.
Yes, I will love that
person
too.
to person, and you do love that.
I love talking. Talk
She's
to me.
she loves the Lord, and it's a great thing. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Appreciate you
Thank
being
you.
here.